Lara always had a heart of gold. She was known for her generosity and warmth, qualities that made her the heart of the community. A beautiful woman in her late 40s, Lara lived a comfortable life with her husband, David, and their 2 children, Emma and Daniel, in a spacious, lovely home in the suburbs. David was a successful businessman, and their family seemed perfect from the outside, close-knit, loving, and happy. One evening, as Lara was returning from a charity event in the city, she spotted a young girl sitting alone on a cold bench under a dim streetlight. Her clothes were torn, her skin pale, and her body hunched over in fatigue. The girl couldn't have been more than 17. Instantly, Lara's heart broke for her. She stopped her car and approached cautiously, calling out, "Are you okay, dear?" Lara asked softly, kneeling beside the girl. The girl's eyes, hollow and filled with sadness, met hers. I have nowhere to go," she whispered, her voice cracking. Lara didn't hesitate. She took the girl by the hand and brought her into the warmth of her car. "You don't have to stay here. Come with me," Lara said, offering a reassuring smile. The girl nodded, too tired and weak to refuse. As they drove home, Lara learned that the girl's name was Leah. She had been on the streets for weeks after running away from an abusive foster home. Lara's heart ached as she listened to Leah's story of hardship and loneliness. Without consulting her husband or children, Lara decided to offer Leah a place to stay. David was initially hesitant when Lara brought Leah home, but seeing the kindness in his wife's eyes and the helplessness in Leah's face, he agreed. Emma and Daniel, both in their early 20s, were polite and friendly to the new guest. Leah quickly became a part of their family, much to everyone's delight. At first, everything was peaceful. Leah was quiet and polite, always offering to help with chores and expressing deep gratitude. Lara felt proud of her decision to help this lost soul, confident that she had made a difference in someone's life. Leah, though seemingly innocent, had a darkness to her that no one saw at first. She had grown skilled at manipulation after years of surviving on the streets. Gradually, she studied each family member, learning their weaknesses, desires, and insecurities. She was patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. One night, Lara noticed Leah sitting in the living room with David. They were chatting, laughing about something that made Lara feel a strange, cold twinge of discomfort. She brushed it off, telling herself she was being paranoid. Leah was like a daughter to her, after all. How could she possibly pose a threat? However, as weeks went by, the bond between David and Leah seemed to grow stronger. Leah was always around him, whether it was helping with household tasks or engaging him in long conversations about life. She was charming, witty, and disarmingly vulnerable, qualities that slowly drew David closer to her. Lara's suspicions deepened one evening when she entered the kitchen and found Leah and David standing too close, their voices dropping as soon as they noticed her presence. David quickly excused himself, but Leah lingered, flashing Lara a sweet, innocent smile. "I was just asking David for advice on life," she said, her tone light, but Lara's gut twisted. Then, strange things started happening between Emma and Daniel. The siblings, once inseparable, began fighting over the most trivial things. Leah seemed to always be in the background during these moments, either innocently stoking the flames of their arguments or comforting one of them afterward. One night, as a family dinner escalated into a shouting match between Emma and Daniel, Lara noticed Leah watching intently, a subtle smile playing on her lips. It was as if she was enjoying the chaos she had quietly orchestrated. Lara's heart sank. She realized too late that Leah wasn't the innocent girl she had taken in. She had sown discord between her children, and worse, she was getting closer to her husband. Lara confronted Leah one evening after David had gone to bed. "Leah," she said, her voice trembling with controlled anger, "what are you trying to do in this house? Why are you coming between my children, between my husband and me?" Leah's face remained calm, her eyes cold and calculating. "I don't know what you mean, Lara," she said softly. "I've only ever wanted to be part of this family." Lara stared at her, searching for a trace of the helpless girl she had found on the street. But all she saw now was a predator in disguise. Leah turned to leave but paused at the doorway, her voice taking on a chilling edge. "You're just jealous," she whispered. Because they love me now. They don't need you anymore. Those words struck Lara like a blow. Panic gripped her as she realized Leah had been systematically driving a wedge between her and her family, and it was working. David had become distant, spending more time with Leah than with her. Emma and Daniel barely spoke to her, blaming her for their constant arguments. Then, one fateful night, everything unraveled. Lara came home late after attending a meeting with some friends, only to find her house eerily quiet. She made her way upstairs to the bedroom, and when she opened the door, she found David and Leah in bed together. The room spun, and Lara's knees buckled. David jumped out of bed, stammering, trying to explain, but the damage was done. Leah sat up, a smug, satisfied smile on her face, making no effort to hide her victory. "You destroyed us!" Lara screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I gave you everything!" But Leah was unbothered. "You're weak, Lara. You let me in, and now everything you had is mine." Lara fled the house that night, heartbroken and shattered. She spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process the betrayal. She reached out to Emma and Daniel, hoping they would take her side, but to her horror, they both blamed her for what had happened. "She drove you away from us, Mum," Emma said coldly. "You were too busy with your charity work to see what we needed." Daniel wasn't much kinder. "Leah's been more of a mother to us than you ever were," he said. Lara was devastated. The girl she had saved had turned her children against her, taken her husband, and stolen her entire life. Alone, Lara began spiraling into despair. She moved into a small run-down apartment on the other side of town, unable to bear the sight of the family she had once held together, now being torn apart by Leah's manipulation. Her once vibrant world was now filled with nothing but shadows and loneliness. But Leah wasn't done. She made sure to flaunt her victory. She moved into Lara's home, took over her role as David's wife, and quickly ingratiated herself further with Emma and Daniel, deepening the divide between them and their mother. Months passed, and Lara hit rock bottom. She had lost everything, her home, her family, her sense of self. But as she sat in the darkness of her small apartment, she realized that she couldn't let Leah win. She couldn't let the girl she had once pitied destroy her completely. So, Lara started to rebuild herself, slowly but surely. She found a therapist, began reconnecting with old friends, and focused on healing. Her pain was still raw, but she refused to let it consume her. One evening she received a call from Emma. Her voice was shaky, filled with regret. "Mum, I think we made a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "Leah, she's different now. She's controlling everything, and Daniel and I can't even talk to each other without her getting in the way. I'm scared." Lara felt a flicker of hope, but she knew better than to rush back into their lives. Leah had woven a web of lies and manipulation that wouldn't be easy to untangle. "I'm here for you, Emma," Lara said gently, "but you have to see things clearly for yourself." Emma's call was just the beginning. Slowly, the facade Leah had built began to crumble. David, too, started to see through her charm. Leah became increasingly erratic, paranoid that she would lose the control she had fought so hard to gain. She lashed out, her manipulations more obvious and desperate. Leah had overplayed her hand, and the family she had sought to control began turning against her. Emma and Daniel realized how they had been manipulated, and David, filled with guilt, finally saw Leah for who she truly was. Leah's downfall was swift and brutal. David kicked her out of the house, and Emma and Daniel cut all ties with her. Homeless once again, Leah disappeared from their lives, just as quickly as she had entered. Lara, though still scarred, had found her strength again. She didn't take her family back immediately. She needed time to heal, and so did they. But they began the long process of reconciliation, and in time, the family began to rebuild what had been broken. Though Lara had lost much, she emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more aware of the shadows that sometimes lurk behind even the kindest of faces. Lara had spent months rebuilding her life, creating a fragile yet hopeful path toward reconciliation with her children and David. She found solace in her newfound independence, working as a consultant for various charities and enjoying the quiet moments in her modest apartment. Though the scars from Leah's betrayal ran deep, the wounds were healing, and Lara believed the worst was behind her. Then, out of nowhere, she received an anonymous letter. It was delivered to her doorstep in a plain envelope with no return address. The message inside was brief but chilling. "You think it's over? You'll never escape me. Watch your back." Lara's heart raced as she read the words, her mind immediately jumping to Leah. After being cast out of their lives, Leah had disappeared. No one had heard from her, and it was assumed she had moved on or fallen back into the same life of homelessness and hardship she had come from. But now, this letter filled Lara with dread, as if a dark cloud had returned to her once clear skies. She took the letter to the police, who dismissed it as a prank or an empty threat from someone trying to scare her. But Lara couldn't shake the feeling that Leah was still out there, lurking, waiting to strike again. She tried to push the fear aside and continued with her life, but the unease lingered. Then the strange occurrences began. First, Lara's car was vandalized in the parking lot of her apartment. The tires were slashed, and the windshield had been shattered, with no sign of who had done it. The police chalked it up to random vandalism, but Lara couldn't help but feel like it was more than that. Next, odd things started happening at her apartment. Lights would flicker at odd hours. Her windows were found unlocked even when she was sure she had locked them. And once, she came home to find her front door ajar. She called the police, but nothing was missing, and there were no signs of forced entry. David and the children urged her to move back into the family home, worried for her safety. But Lara, still needing space and distance, declined. Despite the tension, she felt safer on her own, until the night everything changed. It was a cold, rainy evening when Lara returned home from work. As she entered her apartment, a chill ran down her spine. Something felt off. The air was heavy, suffocating, and the silence of the apartment was unnerving. She called out, but there was no response. And then she saw her, Leah, standing in the middle of the living room, her face gaunt and wild, eyes gleaming with a madness Lara had never seen before. "You!" Lara gasped, her body freezing in fear. "How did you get in here?" Leah smiled, a slow, twisted grin. "Did you really think it was over, Lara? You think you could just take everything from me and move on? You took me in, made me a part of your life, and then threw me out like trash. Now I'm going to take back what's mine." Lara's heart pounded as she slowly backed away, her mind racing for a way out. Leah's once vulnerable and broken persona was gone. Now she stood before Lara like a predator, sharp and deadly. "You destroyed my family," Lara said, her voice trembling with both fear and anger. "I took you in when you had nothing. You turned my children against me, stole my husband, and nearly ruined everything." Leah laughed, a cold, unsettling sound that echoed in the apartment. "You were too weak to keep them. You don't deserve the life you have, Lara. Everything you built is mine, and I'll take it again." Before Lara could react, Leah lunged at her with terrifying speed. They struggled, grappling in the narrow hallway, as Lara fought desperately to break free. Leah's strength was startling, fueled by a dangerous obsession that made her unrelenting. Lara managed to push Leah off her for a moment, scrambling to the kitchen to grab a knife, but Leah was right behind her, knocking the knife from her hand and sending it skittering across the floor. They tumbled together, knocking over furniture, their fight brutal and savage. Just as Lara felt herself slipping into exhaustion, she heard a loud crash as the front door burst open. David, followed by Emma and Daniel, rushed in, their eyes wide with shock at the scene before them. "Mom!" Emma screamed, running to Lara's side. David pulled Leah off Lara and pinned her to the ground, his face a mixture of horror and anger. "Leah, what is wrong with you?" he shouted, his voice shaking with disbelief. But Leah's eyes, wild and unfocused, locked onto Lara. "It's not over," she hissed. "You'll never be rid of me." The police arrived soon after, and Leah was arrested, still screaming about how Lara had stolen everything from her. As the officers dragged her away, Lara collapsed into David's arms, her body trembling with the adrenaline and terror of what had just happened. For weeks after the incident, Lara struggled to sleep. She was haunted by the memory of Leah's twisted face, her menacing words echoing in her mind. The family rallied around her, offering support and love, but the trauma lingered. However, as time passed, things began to return to normal. Leah was sentenced to a psychiatric facility after being deemed mentally unstable, and though the threat seemed to be gone, Lara couldn't shake the feeling that Leah's presence still loomed over her life. One day, several months later, Lara received a call from the psychiatric facility. The voice on the other end was calm, but filled with an underlying tension. "I'm sorry to inform you, Mrs. Lawson, but Leah has escaped." Lara's heart stopped. She dropped the phone, the world around her spinning. Leah had escaped. After everything, the nightmare wasn't over. Panic seized her as memories of the attack flooded back. She had thought she was free, that Leah was finally out of her life, but now, Leah was out there, somewhere, and she was coming back. Lara rushed to her front door, locking it and closing every window. She called David, frantic, telling him what had happened. He promised to come home immediately, but as she hung up, Lara felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she saw a figure standing just outside her living room window, half shrouded by the darkness of the setting sun. It was Leah, smiling. Without hesitation, Lara grabbed her phone, dialing the police as she backed away from the window. But Leah didn't move. She simply stood there, watching, as if savoring Lara's fear. "Lara." Leah's voice drifted through the window, soft but filled with chilling malice. "I told you, you'll never escape me. I'll always be there, lurking in the shadows. This is far from over." As the police sirens echoed in the distance, Leah melted into the shadows, disappearing once again. The darkness Leah had brought into her life would haunt her forever, and she would always be looking over her shoulder, wondering when Leah would strike again. That night, Lara couldn't sleep. Every sound seemed amplified. The creak of the floor, the rustling of trees outside, the occasional drip of the kitchen faucet. She felt Leah's presence everywhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The fear gnawed at her, digging deeper with every passing hour. David stayed with her, refusing to leave her side. He tried to comfort her, but Lara was distant, lost in her thoughts. Leah's haunting words echoed in her mind. "I'll always be there, lurking in the shadows." Lara knew that this wasn't just about fear. It was about survival. Leah was determined to destroy her, and this time she wouldn't stop until everything Lara had left was gone. The following days passed in a blur of paranoia. Lara jumped at every knock on the door, every ring of the phone, convinced that Leah was close, watching. The police set up patrols around the neighborhood, and David installed a new security system. But nothing eased Lara's anxiety. She was living in a constant state of dread, unable to shake the feeling that Leah was coming for her, and that when she did, it would be catastrophic. Then, it happened. It was a cold, rainy afternoon. Lara had just returned from a therapy session, trying to rebuild her life piece by piece. The house was quiet when she stepped inside, the kind of silence that immediately unsettled her. She called out for David, for Emma, for Daniel, but there was no answer. Panic bubbled up inside her as she moved through the house, her footsteps echoing off the walls. Something was wrong. Lara stopped at the living room doorway. Her blood turned to ice. There, on the wall, was a message scrawled in red paint. "You'll lose them all." Beneath the words were pictures of her family. David, Emma, and Daniel, crossed out with thick, jagged lines. Terror seized Lara's chest. She frantically searched the house, calling out for her family, her heart racing. When she reached the master bedroom, she found David lying on the bed, unconscious, a bottle of pills on the floor next to him. "David!" she screamed, shaking him, her hands trembling as she checked for a pulse. It was faint, but he was alive. Without wasting a second, she called an ambulance, tears streaming down her face. What had Leah done to him? As the paramedics arrived and rushed David to the hospital, Lara's mind spiraled into chaos. She hadn't heard from Emma or Daniel all day, and the cryptic message on the wall haunted her. What did Leah mean by, "You'll lose them all"? Lara called both her children repeatedly, but neither answered. Desperation clawed at her. She drove to Emma's apartment first, hoping she'd find her safe, but when she arrived, Emma was nowhere to be found. Her phone was left on the coffee table, and the apartment was eerily untouched, as if she had vanished into thin air. Panic engulfed Lara. She raced to Daniel's apartment next, her hands shaking as she pounded on the door. No answer. She peered through the window and saw Daniel's apartment in disarray. Furniture overturned, shattered glass on the floor. She called the police, her heart sinking into a pit of despair. Hours passed with no word. The police launched a search for Emma and Daniel, but Lara's worst fear had already taken root. Leah had taken them. She had warned Lara that she would lose everything, and now, one by one, her family was slipping away. David remained in the hospital in a medically induced coma after the overdose, and Lara was left alone, consumed by guilt and dread. She had brought Leah into their lives, and now Leah was dismantling her world piece by piece. Days turned into a week, and there was still no sign of Emma or Daniel. Lara felt herself unraveling, the weight of her grief pressing down on her like a suffocating blanket. Every corner of the house reminded her of the family she had lost, and Leah's haunting message burned in her mind. One evening, as Lara sat in the dim light of the kitchen, staring blankly at the wall, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Her hands shook as she opened it. "If you want to see them again, come alone. 9 p.m., the old factory on South Street." Lara's heart raced. She immediately called the police, but when they insisted on sending officers to the location, another message came through. "If I see the police, they die. This is between us, Lara." Terror gripped her, but she couldn't risk losing Emma and Daniel. With a heavy heart, she agreed to meet Leah alone. That night, Lara drove to the old abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. The rain fell in heavy sheets, obscuring the road ahead as her mind raced. The factory was a relic of the past, dark, crumbling, and forgotten by time. She parked outside, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel, forcing herself to breathe. Lara stepped out into the rain, the cold seeping into her bones as she made her way toward the factory's looming entrance. Inside, the air was thick with dampness and decay, the distant sound of dripping water echoing through the empty halls. Her heart pounded in her chest as she ventured deeper into the darkness, calling out for Emma and Daniel. "Leah! I'm here! Where are they?" Her voice echoed, trembling with desperation. And then she heard it, a soft, eerie laugh that sent a chill down her spine. Leah stepped out of the shadows, her eyes wild and filled with malice. Behind her, tied to 2 rusty chairs, were Emma and Daniel, unconscious but alive. "Let them go," Lara begged, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Leah, this has gone too far." Leah's lips curled into a twisted smile. "Too far. You took everything from me, Lara. My life, my home, my place in this world. And now, you're going to lose yours." Lara's breath hitched. "You had a home with us, Leah. We welcomed you in. You destroyed it." Leah's expression darkened, her voice low and venomous. "I destroyed nothing. You're the one who couldn't protect what was yours. You're weak, Lara. Pathetic." Lara took a shaky step forward, her eyes darting to Emma and Daniel, still motionless in the chairs. "I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt them." Leah tilted her head, her smile widening. "It's not that simple, Lara. You see, this was never just about taking your family. It's about breaking you." With that, Leah pulled out a knife, the blade gleaming in the dim light. Lara's heart stopped. "Choose," Leah said softly, her eyes glinting with cruel delight. "One of them lives, the other dies. You decide." Lara's entire body went numb, her mind spinning in disbelief. "No, no, please." Leah stepped closer, pressing the knife to Daniel's throat. "Choose, Lara." The air in the factory seemed to vanish, leaving Lara gasping for breath. The sight of her children, bound and helpless, filled her with an agony she had never known. Her mind raced, searching for a way out, but Leah was unrelenting. In that moment, Lara felt something shift inside her. An anger, a fury that had been buried beneath the fear and grief. Leah had pushed her too far. This wasn't about making a choice. This was about survival. "No," Lara said, her voice steady despite the terror. "I'm not playing your game." Leah's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "You don't have a choice, Lara." Lara's eyes locked onto Leah's. "You want to break me? You'll never succeed. I won't let you control me, and I won't let you hurt my children." In a flash, Lara lunged at Leah, catching her off guard. They struggled in the darkness, the knife clattering to the floor as they grappled for control. The sound of metal echoed through the factory as Lara fought with every ounce of strength she had left, driven by the primal instinct to protect her family. At last, Lara managed to pin Leah down, grabbing the knife and holding it to her throat. Leah's eyes widened in surprise, her smug composure finally cracking. For a moment, they stared at each other, the tension thick between them. "You'll never win," Lara whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Because I'm not weak. I'm not the woman you thought you could break." Lara released the knife, letting it drop to the floor, and backed away. The police, who Lara had secretly called earlier, burst into the factory, guns drawn, as they rushed in to save Emma and Daniel. Leah, her face twisted in defeat, was handcuffed and led away, her reign of terror finally over. Lara collapsed to the ground, her body shaking with relief and exhaustion. She had faced her darkest fears, fought for her family, and come out the other side. The nightmare was finally over, but the scars it left behind would remain forever. As she held Emma and Daniel close, tears of relief streaming down her face, Lara realized that she had lost many battles along the way, but in the end, she had won the war, and Leah, the woman who had sought to destroy her, would never haunt her again.